most viewers assume the endings they watch are final, unaltered, and true to the filmmaker's vision. But within the history of horror lies an unsettling truth. Some endings survived for only a single screening before being quietly rewritten, cut apart, or buried altogether. These vanished finales weren't just alternate ideas, they were the real conclusions, the ones audiences were never allowed to see again. Behind closed doors, in dim projection rooms, early viewers witnessed scenes that were too disturbing, too ambiguous, or too revealing for the studios to risk releasing. Some finales twisted the story in unexpected directions. Others pushed characters into darker fates. A few dared to expose truths that executives feared would generate backlash or leave audiences shaken. And so, the endings were recut, softened, or replaced, while the originals faded into rumor. What remains today are fragments, half-forgotten descriptions from crew members, scribbled notes from test screenings, and whispers of VHS workprints that appeared briefly before vanishing. These lost finales hover at the edges of film history, proof that the story we know is rarely the whole story. Tonight, we revisit 15 horror films whose true endings were shown once, then erased. These are the hidden finales that flickered across a screen only to be swallowed by the dark. Fact: 1 Magic, 1978. Magic already treads deeply into psychological horror, but the original ending took its exploration of fractured identity to a level that left early viewers shaken. Instead of resolving Corky's struggle with Fats through tragedy, the lost finale depicted the complete collapse of his sense of self. In this version, Corky survived the final confrontation, but when Peggy entered the cabin, the man who greeted her wasn't Corky, it was Fats, speaking through Corky's lips with perfect calm. Corky cradled the dummy as though it were a living companion, his eyes distant, emptied of his former personality. He shifted between whisper and giggle in Fats's voice, carrying on a one-sided conversation while Peggy watched in horror. Unable to reach him, she fled the cabin. Corky remained seated in the dim light, rocking gently with the puppet in his arms. The final shot held on his face emotionless, except for the faintest smile before fading to black. Executives found the ending too psychologically disturbing and feared it would alienate audiences unfamiliar with such intense depictions of dissociation. The sequence was replaced with a more straightforward and less haunting resolution. If any footage from the original ending still exists, it has never been publicly revealed, but the whispered accounts of those who saw it suggest a version that pushed the film's themes to their most unsettling extreme. Fact 2. The New Kids, 1985. The New Kids presents itself as a teenage survival thriller, but its first ending was deeply somber, too somber, according to the studio. Instead of offering a cathartic victory, the lost finale confronted the psychological aftermath of violence inflicted on young shoulders. In the abandoned version, the final confrontation with Eddie didn't resolve in the amusement park. Eddie managed to escape and corner the siblings inside their own home. The fight was quick, desperate, intimate. When Abby delivered the fatal blow, she didn't celebrate or collapse in relief. Instead, she sat quietly at the kitchen table, her hands trembling, her breath uneven. Police lights flickered through the windows, painting the room in red and blue flashes while she stared at the blood on her clothes, unable to reconcile what she had been forced to do. Studio executives feared audiences, especially younger viewers, would reject such a bleak emotional ending. They called it too heavy for the demographic, worried it would overshadow the film's intended tone. A completely new, more triumphant conclusion was shot to replace it. No stills from the darker ending have surfaced, but those who worked on it describe it as the film's most honest moment, one that acknowledged trauma instead of glossing over it. Fact 3. Alone in the Dark, 1982. Before New Line Cinema became synonymous with iconic horror, it released Alone in the Dark, a brutal exploration of paranoia and chaos. But the film's original ending was so sweeping and nihilistic that the studio rejected it outright, fearing audiences weren't prepared for such an unrestrained vision of societal collapse. In the lost finale, the violence triggered by the asylum escapees didn't stay confined to a single convenience store. Instead, it spilled across the entire town. Fires ignited in the background, alarms wailed, and civilians driven into panic began attacking one another. The killers drifted through the pandemonium unnoticed, blending seamlessly into the chaos they had sparked. One shot in particular became infamous among those who saw the early cut. Frank Hawks walking calmly through a burning street, illuminated by flames licking at shattered windows. He looked utterly at ease, as if watching a world he always knew was on the brink. His final line, delivered quietly as he vanished into the smoke, was said to be, "Night only needs a spark." Executives deemed the ending too apocalyptic, too large in scale, and too thematically dark for the film's modest budget and intended audience. The entire sequence was removed and replaced with a more contained resolution. No footage has ever resurfaced, but those who witnessed it insist it was the film's most unforgettable moment. Fact 4. The Lift 1983. The lift already leans into mechanical menace, but the film once concluded with a revelation so strange and unsettling that it would have shifted the story from technological terror to biological nightmare. Crew members who worked with early practical effects claimed that the first ending took Felix deep beneath the elevator shaft, where he discovered a biomechanical organism taking shape, a pulsing mass of wires, fluids, and semi-organic tissue resembling an embryonic humanoid. Its eyes, if they could be called that, reportedly opened as he approached, reacting to his presence with a faint, twitching movement. The implication was bold. The elevator wasn't malfunctioning, it was evolving into a living creature. Producers objected, arguing that the ending would confuse audiences and derail the film's grounded tone. The entire sequence was removed and replaced with a much simpler confrontation involving the elevator's artificial intelligence. No verified footage of the creature survives. Some Dutch television rumors suggest fragments once aired by mistake, but no evidence has surfaced to support the claim. Fact 5. The Incubus 1982. The Incubus already dwells in dread, but its first ending ventured into psychological horror so deeply that it was abandoned almost immediately. Instead of externalizing the evil force as something separate from Sam, the original finale confronted viewers with a far more disturbing truth. According to individuals who worked in early post-production, the lost ending showed Sam awakening in a dim hospital room. As he sat up, shaken and disoriented, he glanced toward a mirror on the far wall. His reflection did not mimic him. The figure in the glass stared back with a twisted, spectral grin, one that shifted subtly with each flicker of the fluorescent lights. The moment suggested that the demon had not been defeated but had rooted itself inside him. The scene reportedly ended with Sam reaching toward the reflection, only for the reflection to move first. Test viewers found the finale suffocating, calling it too intimate and horrifying in a way that follows you home. The studio overruled the creative team, replacing the ending with a softer implication rather than a direct revelation. Hints of the original creature makeup and early mirror tests have surfaced, but the full scene remains lost, transforming it into one of the film's most enduring mysteries. Fact 6. The Funhouse 1981. Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse ends on a note of exhausted survival, Amy staggering into daylight, traumatized but alive. Yet the film originally concluded with a moment so bleak and psychologically heavy that Universal decided audiences could not be left with it. In the discarded ending, Amy did not collapse into the arms of rescuers. Instead, she wandered aimlessly through the empty carnival grounds at dawn, her movements slow and disconnected. Carnival workers, half aware and indifferent, passed around her like phantoms. Close-up shots blurred their faces, mirroring the disorientation of a mind unable to process its own survival. Amy didn't scream or cry. She simply drifted, hollowed out by the night's violence. The camera reportedly followed her until she stopped beneath a tattered banner, staring into space as though her consciousness had retreated somewhere unreachable. This final image, soft morning light falling on a girl whose spirit had been fractured, was considered far too dark for a commercial horror film. Executives demanded a reshoot that transformed the ending into a more traditional beat of rescue and release. The original footage has never surfaced in any home video release or archival material. Those who saw it describe it as one of Hooper's most unsettling endings, not because of monsters, but because of what trauma leaves behind. Fact 7. The Watcher in the Woods 1980. Few films have had their endings erased as swiftly as The Watcher in the Woods. When the original cut briefly reached theaters, audiences were confronted with a finale so strange, so visually jarring, that Disney withdrew the film almost immediately. In that early version, the mysterious Watcher was not hinted at but fully revealed an alien-like entity rendered with glowing insectoid features and unsettling practical effects. The finale reportedly depicted a dimensional exchange between Karen and the creature, with warped, shimmering visuals that resembled a fever dream more than a family-friendly supernatural tale. The sequence was ambitious, disorienting, and unmistakably eerie. Instead of awe, viewers reacted with confusion and discomfort. Critics described the creature as bizarre and unsettlingly grotesque. Disney executives panicked, fearing lasting damage to the film's reputation. They pulled the movie, re-edited the entire ending, and released a toned-down version that stripped away most of the surreal elements. The original ending became a rarity almost overnight. Only those who attended the earliest screenings or possessed unauthorized VHS recordings ever saw the creature in motion. Its disappearance has made it one of the most talked about lost endings in horror history. Fact 8. The Unseen, 1980. The quiet dread that permeates the unseen once culminated in an ending far more chilling than the one audiences received. Instead of resolving the story at the farmhouse, the original finale extended the terror outward, hinting that the horror would continue far beyond Jennifer's ordeal. According to crew recollections, Junior survived the final confrontation and slipped away into the fog-shrouded night. The camera followed him as he drifted through deserted streets, his awkward, childlike movements contrasted by the eerie quiet around him. Eventually, he encountered a family at a bus stop, innocent, unaware. The scene ended before revealing what he might do, leaving viewers with the unsettling implication that the cycle of violence had only just begun. Test audiences reportedly felt the ending was merciless and unsettling in a way that lingers too long. The studio feared that leaving Junior alive and suggesting new victims would make the film feel cruel rather than suspenseful. They ordered a revised ending in which Junior's threat was decisively ended. Though night shoot stills have surfaced, showing fog-covered streets not present in the final cut, no footage of the abandoned epilogue has been found. Its absence only deepens the film's quiet, persistent unease. Fact 9. The Sentinel, 1977. The Sentinel is already steeped in religious terror, but its original ending ventured into territory so intense that Universal immediately deemed it unsuitable for release. Rather than closing with a subdued acceptance of Allison's fate, the lost finale confronted viewers with a full spiritual transformation. Accounts from those who viewed the early cut describe Allison undergoing a dramatic, almost apocalyptic change. Her eyes reportedly turned milky white as faint symbols pulsed beneath her skin, illuminating her face with an eerie glow. Figures said to represent both angelic and tormented souls materialized around her, crowding the apartment in a surreal convergence of the holy and the damned. The room shimmered with shifting light, as though two realms were overlapping through her. The sequence crescendoed into an overwhelming vision that suggested Allison was not merely replacing the old Sentinel, she was becoming a supernatural barrier herself, tethered between worlds in a state of eternal vigilance. Universal executives feared a backlash from religious groups who were already critical of the film's themes. The studio insisted on a quieter, more restrained ending, removing the intense spiritual imagery entirely. No confirmed footage has been located. What remains is a legend of an ending that dared to portray a cosmic battle through the transformation of a single woman. Fact 10. The Boogeyman, 1980. While The Boogeyman leans heavily on supernatural imagery, its original ending ventured into far more symbolic and deeply unsettling territory. Instead of reaffirming the mirror as the conduit for evil, the first finale placed that burden directly on Lacey herself. Those familiar with the early cut described a haunting sequence set back at the farmhouse. Lacey approached the shattered pieces of the mirror, but her reflection behaved independently, smiling faintly while her real face tensed with fear. The reflection gradually grew more expressive, almost delighted, as though the evil had already settled inside her. The final shot reportedly showed the reflection reaching forward, hinting that Lacey had become the new host for the entity. Audiences at the initial screening found the ending confusing and too metaphorical. The studio worried that the surreal twist would alienate viewers and muddy the film's central mythology. The reflection-based finale was removed and replaced with a simpler hint of continuing danger. Mentions of the original ending appeared briefly in European interviews, but no footage has ever surfaced. The idea of Lacey as the vessel of evil remains one of the most intriguing and most lost interpretations of the film. Fact 11. Eyes of a Stranger, 1981. Eyes of a Stranger is unsettling even in its final form, but the film once ended on a note of emotional devastation that proved too harrowing for viewers. Instead of surviving with her strength and newfound agency, Tracy faced a fate that underscored the lasting trauma of violence. The lost ending extended the climactic confrontation. After the killer escaped for a brief moment, Tracy encountered him in an elevator shaft, where the struggle unfolded in cramped, suffocating silence. He fell to his death, but the victory came at a cost. Tracy was left gravely injured, and the final scene reportedly showed her sitting motionless in a hospital bed, staring blankly ahead as a muted news report mentioned the killer's demise. Her expression did not change. Her recovery was not promised. Test viewers reacted with unease, calling the ending cruel and emotionally punishing. The studio feared backlash for showing a victim endure further suffering even after defeating her attacker. As a result, the finale was rewritten to offer a sense of closure and resilience. Whispers of a VHS workprint persist, but no verified footage has resurfaced. The darker ending remains little more than a memory among those who witnessed it once. Fact 12. The House on Skull Mountain, 1974. The House on Skull Mountain already leans heavily into mysticism and ancestral power, but the original ending pushed the supernatural much further than the studio dared to allow. Instead of the restrained final confrontation audiences know, the first cut erupted into a full manifestation of the occult forces that haunted the estate. According to recollections from crew members, the lost finale depicted spectral figures emerging from the darkness surrounding the mansion, towering shapes with glowing eyes, drifting like ancestral guardians awakened from centuries of sleep. Lorena stood at the center of the ritual site, her voice shifting into layered tones, as though multiple generations were speaking through her at once. Her transformation wasn't subtle. She appeared to merge with the old bloodline in a way that blurred the boundary between human and spirit. The sequence reportedly ended with Lorena standing outside the mansion at dawn, her expression serene yet unreadable, suggesting she had become the new vessel of the family's supernatural legacy. Studio executives grew anxious. The intensity of the visuals and the overt spiritual imagery were considered too extreme, especially for audiences unfamiliar with such depictions. The entire sequence was cut and replaced with a gentler, far less mystical conclusion. No footage has been recovered. Only scattered memories hint at what might have been the film's boldest moment. Fact 13. Dead of Winter, 1987. In its official form, Dead of Winter allows its protagonist a slim but meaningful escape, a moment of survival after enduring psychological and physical torment. But the original ending denied her even that small measure of hope. Those who viewed the early cut described a finale in which Katie fled the mansion only to collapse in the snow, her breath fading into the cold air. The camera reportedly pulled back slowly, absorbing her still body against the vast white landscape. There were no last-minute rescues, no triumphant music, just the quiet suggestion that she had succumbed to the brutality of the night. Executives deemed the ending too bleak and worried it would alienate viewers who expected a more traditional resolution. They ordered reshoots that transformed Katie's fate from inevitable tragedy to determined survival. The lost footage has never resurfaced, and little evidence remains beyond scattered recollections from those who worked on the early edits. But for some, this darker finale better matched the film's themes, a reminder that not all stories end with the victim escaping. Fact 14. Curtains, 1983. Few productions were as fractured as Curtains, a film stitched together from competing visions and conflicting schedules. But hidden within its chaotic creation was a finale unlike anything found in the genre, a theatrical nightmare that was abandoned almost as soon as it was shot. In the lost ending, Samantha didn't fall victim to the killer. Instead, she survived, but her sanity unraveled. The final scene placed her on an empty theater stage, performing a monologue to an invisible audience. Spotlights flickered across the stage, revealing motionless bodies arranged around her like discarded props. As she spoke, her voice grew more strained, her expression drifting from triumphant to deranged. The scene reportedly ended on an extreme close-up of her unsettling smile. The studio rejected the ending immediately, calling it too experimental and too disturbing for a commercial release. They opted for a more conventional final girl arc, redirecting the spotlight away from Samantha's descent and onto Patty's survival. No confirmed footage has surfaced. A few crew members have claimed to see fragments of the sequence, but nothing has been officially released. What remains is the idea of a finale that transformed the slasher format into a surreal psychological breakdown. Fact 15. The Legacy, 1978. Among the films of the late 70s that blend elegance with the supernatural, The Legacy hides a finale that could have completely reshaped how audiences understood its heroine. In the version seen by early viewers, Margaret's fate wasn't a quiet acceptance of her inheritance, it was a full surrender to it. This lost ending reportedly portrayed her stepping into her new role with unnerving confidence. She moved through the mansion as though it were a living extension of her, each room responding to her presence. One lingering shot showed her expression shifting into something unreadable, her eyes carrying a faint, otherworldly glow. Rather than leaving her transformation ambiguous, this version made it clear. Margaret was no longer just a survivor, she was the next embodiment of the power that governed the estate. Those who attended the single screening described the sequence as too conclusive, too sinister, and too final. Executives feared audiences wouldn't accept a protagonist who embraced darkness so fully. The ending was removed, replaced with something softer and more mysterious. Whether the original reel still exists is unknown. Some believe it was quietly destroyed, while others insist a lone tape once circulated among insiders. Whatever remains of that darker conclusion now lives only in whispered recollections. Bonus film Paper House, 1988. Paper House has always been a haunting blend of childhood vulnerability and dreamlike surrealism, but the finale originally crafted for the film would have left audiences with a far deeper ache. Instead of delivering a bittersweet reconciliation between reality and imagination, the lost ending plunged Anna's journey into a stark and heartbreaking truth. In this early version, Mark's health in the real world deteriorated in direct parallel to the collapsing dream environment. During Anna's final dream, she raced across the unstable landscape she once controlled, reaching for Mark as the structures she had drawn began to fold and tear. But this time, she was too late. Mark slipped from her grasp as the world disintegrated in a burst of pale light. Anna woke to learn he had died during the night. The film then followed her to the windswept hill where she first envisioned the paper house. She carried her sketchbook, not to create something new, but to let go of what remained. She tore out the page bearing Mark's likeness, their imagined refuge, and released it into the breeze. The camera reportedly tracked the paper as it spun upward, fragile and trembling, before vanishing into the sky. It was quiet, profound, and devastating. But executives feared the emotional heaviness would overwhelm viewers, especially given the film's youthful protagonists. They replaced the ending with something gentler, something easier to bear. Today, that original finale exists only in rumors and memories, yet for many, it remains the version that would have captured the film's soul most truthfully. Every one of these films carries a shadow, a version of itself that audiences were never meant to experience. Hidden reels, discarded edits, and lost finales still linger in vaults, private shelves, and forgotten archives, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. What we've explored tonight is only a glimpse of what once existed before. Studios reshaped these stories into something safer, quieter, and less unsettling. If you want us to continue digging through the buried corners of horror cinema to find the endings that were cut, the scenes that disappeared, and the truths left unspoken, let us know in the comments. Until our next descent, stay alert, stay curious, and don't look away when the lights go down.